The Wests Tigers Podcast, proudly supported by the Wests Tigers Podcast Forum. Have your say on everything Wests Tigers by joining up for free today. Follow the link at westtigerspodcast.com.au.
Hello, welcome to the West Tigers podcast, episode number 188. We're falling short of calling it a special edition podcast. Let's just say we're doing this one because the schedule's thrown out a little bit because of State of Origin, but also because there's some pretty significant news around, in case you've missed it. Cameron Ciraldo has said no to coaching the West Tigers, and the most relieved man in Sydney, for personal reasons, is Eddie Otto, because Eddie was pretty adamant that it wasn't going to happen, and so much so he was going to appear on the podcast in a dress. But the dress can stay in the cupboard, Eddie. But so good for you on one level, but disappointed in Ciraldo's decision.
I would have been happy to wear the dress, Joel. I said that as a bit of reverse psychology, praying that he would still come. But sadly, it felt a little bit like clockwork, this narrative that has happened once or twice before with Josh Addo-Carr, probably to a lesser extent, Latrell Mitchell. I think he probably was pretty keen 2 weeks ago. Personally, I think the performances the last 2 weeks, a bit of leaking from the club in regards to, Luke Brooks being dropped, plus the media scrutiny, has probably turned him away. That's why I say we've seen this narrative before.
Yeah, so those recent performances, it's certainly been in the media quite a lot. Declan, were you surprised to hear that Cameron Ciraldo was knocking us back?
I probably wasn't surprised. I was always quite 50-50 on the proposition. On the one hand, I do think it's a good job, but on the other hand, I think I completely agree with Eddie. The fact that there was so much media scrutiny around it, and the fact that, he is close to Ivan Cleary, and there were just all these other obstacles. It felt like it was an uphill battle pretty much from last week onwards, and you can't really be that surprised that he said no when you take into account all those factors.
Gary, on the last edition of the podcast, you're making some good points about Ciraldo's resume is good, and obviously there's some attraction there, but there are other options, aren't there? I mean, I don't think any of us are sitting here particularly worried about Cameron missing out on Cameron, but it's more so the process that the West Tigers have gone through and got to this point, which has certainly got the fans upset.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake we've made, once again, is how public we've been with our desire to be chasing one person. I think if we had just gone about this a little bit quieter and in the background and made our approaches to Cameron any way that we wanted to, but just not put it as much in the media, then I don't even think there would have been need for an announcement yesterday to say that he said no. You'd just continue on with the search. And I think the only reason why this has turned into a bigger issue than it probably needs to be is that we were quite clear in the media that he was our number one target. You have a look, Christian Wolf yesterday or the day before said no to the Warriors as well. And I don't think that's going to be as big a story because they weren't as open in the media about it. So while disappointed that we missed it out on Ciraldo, I wanted Cameron Ciraldo. I don't think it's the end of the world. I just wish we played it a little bit smarter in the media and went about our business a little bit more behind closed doors than we did.
I would just like to go on the record and officially state that I am concerned about not getting Ciraldo. I think that by not getting him, I think the club has really put themselves in a position against the wall to fail with the next rebuild, because essentially the rebuild has already kind of failed before it's even gotten started from my point of view.
But Eddie, I mean, to Declan's point, I mean, Cameron Ciraldo has definitely got some runs on the board and some attributes that look to be a good fit for us, but there was no guarantee of success with him as compared to appointing somebody else. Do you feel the same way?
No, I agree with that. I'm sort of with Gary in that regard. I don't think he was necessarily going to be a home run. We've seen what's happened with Trent Barrett, who was basically in Cameron Ciraldo's shoes a few years ago and has flopped twice as a head coach at clubs that maybe were in a slightly better position than us, particularly at Manly. But like Gary said, it's just it's just the way it turned out. Sheen's, when that initial press conference when he talked about development coach, then he went on to say he is our number one target. I just get the feeling that leads us down the rabbit hole at the moment, where we've pinned ourselves to whoever we get is obviously going to be plan B or plan C. And that's going to invite more media scrutiny on the club.
And I think 100%, there's only really two coaches who we could really attract in the game that I consider a high certainty of success at our club. And you're talking about Bellamy and probably Robinson. I think anyone else comes with their own risks. And I think anyone that we appoint has risks. And I spoke about a lot last year about not wanting a rookie coach at all because it's a difficult club to work. It's a different club to work in. But I've been swayed around to supporting Cameron Ciraldo because he does have a very good resume. And the big thing that I wanted with Cameron Ciraldo was the reputation that he has. The reputation he has across the game brings the ability to bring players across from other clubs. And that's something we've been lacking the last couple of years, is that ability to draw players from other clubs to our club. And I think that's what he would have brought. And I think that's what he has over the other possible candidates. Now, as I said the other night, that's basically hype, and hype isn't always something that plays out. So I think there are other good options. I don't think they have the pulling power that he kind of had, but this needed to be done a lot quieter because it only looks like we've failed at the moment because we came out and said that was what we wanted. Even if we had said we're a development club and we're looking at a development coach, even if we had come out and said that and then chased after Ciraldo as hard as you wanted, missed him, no one really had to know about that, and then appointed someone like John Morris, you can still argue you've gone down that route. I think the biggest problem is, as I said a moment ago, is that we made it clear that one person was our target. And it seems to be a habit we have of playing these things out a bit too much in the media and it coming back to bite us.
Yeah, Gary, well, I agree that Ciraldo is definitely no sure thing to be a successful head coach. And you said that hype can disappear, but a coach's professional reputation is so important these days. So much so to the point where I think that if Ciraldo was appointed, I think the rebuild would have been significantly shorter. I reckon we would have been competitive, maybe 2023, definitely 2024, because he had that reputation where he could bring good players across. If we got him, suddenly someone like Matt Barton could have been realistic. But now that he has said no, and none of the other coaches, short of Poole and Todd Payton, which I'm sure we're talking about, that seems very unlikely. None of these other coaches have that attribute. So now this is going to be a long rebuild, and there's just no way to get around it.
And that's the part I'm most disappointed about missing, is that reputation he has, which brings that ability to draw players. That's what we're going to miss out on. And 100% agree, none of the others have that. But there are others with similar sort of CVs to him that can bring something to our club. I'm disappointed as anyone to miss out on him, but he's not necessarily the saviour. He's not necessarily going to walk in and turn the club around. And if I'm really honest, the fact it's a little bit different if he chooses to go to the Bulldogs. If he chooses to go to the Bulldogs, I see that as more as a slight on our club. But if he chooses to stay at the Panthers as an assistant coach, to me, that tells me a fair bit about Cameron Ciraldo as a person. And if he was umming and ahhing about coming here and he decides to stay at Penrith as an assistant, then I don't really think he has the attributes we need for him to be successful at our club. Our club is a difficult club to coach at. It's been shown many times. We've gone through coaches. We've ended a lot of coaches' careers. And if he was 50-50, if he was 60-40 coming to our club, then that's probably not strong enough to work at our club. We need someone who is committed to our club. And if he's not committed to our club, which he obviously isn't, and decides to stay as an assistant coach, that says a lot about where he sees himself in his career and not just how he sees us. So we need someone who is committed to getting the job done here. We can talk about Madge being committed to get the job here. He 100% was committed to getting the job here, and even he had difficulty here. So I think that's something to remember in this situation.
I think the most disappointing thing for me is, if the end goal is to win a competition, so if you're 1 in 16 teams, how are you ever expected to win a competition if you consistently only hit your second or your third target for literally everything, whether it's players or coaches. And that's just what this administration has done consistently. They've never hit the first target. If the number one target has other options, they take the other options. And that's just no way to be successful.
If you haven't been successful for 11 years, that's going to be a problem you're going to face. And I can argue the last couple of appointments, I don't think we've really missed our number one guy with either of our last two appointments. We got Ivan Cleary. He was quite obviously the number one guy we're looking at. I think he was the only guy we looked at. When we appointed Madge, we looked at Bennett, and Bennett was happy to come, but didn't want to come for 12 months. That was the only reason why we made a move to Michael Maguire, who was our second choice in that situation. But we got him too. So in that situation, we got both our first and second choices to agree to come, but they haven't worked out at the club. So it's hard to say that we're consistently missing that first man when the last two times we've pretty much got the first man and they haven't worked. And I really think Ivan Cleary, the reason why I'm so dirty on him is I think he was the perfect guy to lead us out of this, and then he did what he did. And I think that adds to where we are now as well.
I think what annoys me the most is I feel like a broken record, because I've been saying this for years. The club needs some help with PR. It needs some help with selling itself. You know, it's a buyer's market for coaches. There's more coaches than there are clubs, right? Yet we pitched that story in regards to Cameron Ciraldo as we brought him into Concord and pitched the club to Cameron Ciraldo. You know, we're never, ever able to put ourselves in a position where we're negotiating from any strength. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's absolutely PR 101 that you'd say, look, we're talking to a whole bunch of different people. We've got CVs coming in from left and right. We're an attractive club. We've got a good crop of young players coming through. We've got room to move in the salary cap, you know, and we're going to go through it and we'll make a decision based on who we think is the right fit for the Tigers, you know. But the way that they've done it, it makes no sense whatsoever. And I just think they're so stubborn and pig-headed in there at Concord, and they really need some help in that regard. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Declan.
Yeah, like not only have they not gotten their man and, you know, just crushed the spirits of the fans and put a heap of pressure on the next guy that's going to take over because he knows he wasn't first choice, but they've also showed our salary cap situation is that Cameron Ciraldo in that 6-hour meeting, and they talked about salary cap according to the rumor, but they probably would have also talked about young players as well that the Tigers really rate. So he now knows all of that, and he's going to stay at Penrith. And you can't tell me that he's not going to tell Ivan Cleary some of that information. So the club has really left themselves vulnerable here by their own making, really.
Eddie, a really good post that I read on the West Tigers podcast forum just before we came on. Matt V. Tiger, who's a new member, and he's made some good posts so far. He said the 5-year offer for Cameron Ciraldo, he said he's described as being a reactionary move. He said it was similar to the signings after the Big Four debacle, where they kind of just went, oh my goodness, you know, we're in this spot. Let's throw money at guys like Mbai and Madalino and Packer and that sort of thing, right? In hindsight, do you think that 5 years for Ciraldo maybe was a bit over the top, or we were backing ourselves into a bit of a corner there?
Perhaps. It's probably not the ideal length of contract I'd want. I'd probably go as high as 4 at very most, but you know, that's the situation the club's in. I think we've seen it with players in the past. You mentioned Moses Mbai, and then we have to go a little bit overboard in order to tempt them, and that's part of the problem. But in saying that, I think your head coach is probably the most important person in your organisation. So if you have to pull out all stops, you may as well do it for a head coach. My frustration and anger, Joel, it doesn't necessarily stem from the fact we didn't get Cameron Ciraldo. It's more the fact that we sacked Michael Maguire and we have essentially just thrown away this season. I remember saying at the time, the day we sacked Madge, I hope and I pray that this club have their next coach locked in, because otherwise there is no excuse for sacking him halfway through this season, when I thought, yes, he's had 3.5 years, and yes, the roster's not where it needs to be, but at the moment we are in a worse position than we were 3 weeks ago. I don't think there's any doubt about that. That could change in the next few days. I don't want to hang everyone at the moment. We don't know who's coming in, but at the moment that's not smelling too good for me.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a pretty dire position as far as we can see. Look from the outside looking in. I mean, sometimes we don't know what the machinations are on the inside, and sometimes they can be different. And I've experienced that with different people within the club over the years. But at this point, it's looking pretty bleak. Gary, as Eddie's saying there in regards to sacking Maguire, and I think I'm opposed to that. I thought it was time for Maguire to go. But be that as it may, the most damning thing, the most interesting thing is that we now know that there definitely wasn't another coach signed, sealed, and delivered before we sacked Maguire. And that's a risky move.
It is a risky move, but there's also, you had a guy with a very strong reputation at the club, and my opinion is, and rightly or wrongly, that the club was trying to be respectful for him and not going behind his back and employing someone else behind his back. I can kind of understand that, but we're in a fairly cutthroat world in the NRL, and you can't get by on your integrity like that. I think it probably would have been a lot smarter move to have the next person lined up. I don't have a huge issue with Michael Maguire getting sacked still. At the time, I was happy to give him to the end of the year, but the arguments around recruitment that are now on hold because we don't have a coach, so there's that argument against it. But we do have a bit of money to spend over the next 2 years, and if Michael Maguire is not going to be that coach, then I don't see a lot of point in him spending that money when it's going to be someone else's squad going forward. So I would have loved to have had someone lined up to go straight into the role. I think that would have been better for the club. But I think they were trying to be respectful, but that doesn't always work.
Declan, yeah, well, respectful and integrity are words that Gary has used there. But look at Penrith. They have worked without respect or integrity in the last 5 years, and they're the premiers. Maybe we need to get some attitude about it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've all kind of seen what Ivan Cleary does at the Tigers, and history it is well and truly written by the victors. I mean, as soon as Ivan Cleary won that premiership with the Penrith Panthers, like that's pretty much been erased what he did to us. No one really cares. And you look at what the Sharks did to John Morris. I mean, John Morris was given a poison chalice at Cronulla, and he did a really, really, really good job to kind of weather the storm and get their cap in a good situation where they could sign Hines and Finucane. But then the Sharks just didn't think he was the right guy going forward, and they just kind of like brutally sacked him. But then, look where they are now in the top 8. So you can't really argue that it hasn't worked for them. But like to Gary's point, like you say the Tigers were trying to be respectful, but then, it came out on Aero 360, like, but that he was basically, like going to get sacked the next day. So I don't really see how that's been respectful either, because it was leaked to the media like before it even happened. So yeah, I just don't know. Like, I don't even think we were respectful to Madge in that regard.
Where to from here, Eddie? How do you see this panning out over the next week or so?
I honestly don't know, Joel, the answer to that question. In terms of coaches, like I think Declan and Gary and Steve, Todd Payton's the dream now. I don't know how realistic that is, given he is under contract at a high-flying North Queensland. But other than that, I would say, like I said 2 weeks ago, I have a feeling John Morris is probably in the pole position now, given he is, I think, a plan B option under the terms that Tim Sheens has spoken about. But I would be entertaining an experienced coach, someone like Shane Flanagan, who I know is not popular with everyone, but I think could at least possibly salvage, our reputation out of this, and perhaps he still has some gravitas in terms of players, and possibly attracting players.
Gary, what do you think? No, I'm not going to ask you. I think it's Shane Flanagan. We definitely know how you feel about Shane Flanagan.
My opinion hasn't changed despite what's happened in the last 24 hours, and my opinion won't be changing there.
Do you want to just go over? No, let's not do that again. I was going to ask you, is there a scenario where, I reckon Todd Payton's the kind of guy that wouldn't walk out on the Cowboys, but maybe potentially we could sign him for 2024 when he is off contract, and we do the next 18 months where it's the Kamali and Sheen show. Is that something that's an option?
Well, it's not a great option. It puts us in a holding pattern for 12 months, and I don't really know how that kind of works. I know we're kind of done that for the next 6 months, but then spreading it out, it'll be 18 months between us sacking a coach and the new guy coming in. I don't think Kamali can do it on his own. If we were to entertain any thought of that, I would think someone like Tim Sheens probably has to up his involvement quite a lot in that squad. And probably, if we were looking at that, I'd probably prefer to have Tim Sheens coaching for that period of time instead of Brett Kamali.
Declan, you were pretty hopeful of getting Serraldo, and I think you saw the potential positives there. What's your plan B? What do you think is going to happen? What do you hope is going to happen?
Well, I think obviously the plan B is Payton, because he's probably, I think Steve said it on the podcast on Thursday, I think he's probably got even an even better resume than Serraldo does, because he's turning the Cowboys around, and it did look like he was turning the Warriors around as well. So he's got those runs on the board. But I think we're gonna find out very, very quickly as to whether he's interested or not, and it doesn't look good at the moment. So with him being ticked off the board, I would be happy, or not happy, but I think John Morris probably fits what we've been hearing, because he does have that development background from Cronulla. I think Christian Wolf is another interesting name, but the thing about the Super League is it's even worse than the NRL in terms of the haves and have-nots, and he's definitely, St. Helens are definitely a club that are in the haves at the moment. So I would be a little bit worried if he was to come over, and because I don't really know his background. So I think that if Payton says no, which I expect he will, I think John Morris has got to be the odds-on favourite here.
Speaking about Todd Payton, I think it was Declan said in our group chat last night that even with Payton, he would be our plan B and would be his plan B. The interesting point about that is a couple of years ago, we were 100% his plan A. So even the Warriors were pretty much his plan B, and then I think the Cowboys were his plan C. So maybe we can come back and be his plan B. So I think there is an interest there. I think he has a love of the club. I think he has a very good relationship with Tim Sheens. So while highly unlikely, I think there is a small glimmer of a chance of that happening, especially if there's reports some of his family would like to come back to Sydney. So that provides a little bit of an opportunity. And to be honest, at this point in time, it seems most likely type of person we're going to get is someone who has an idea about the club already and someone who knows Tim Sheens quite well. I think that's kind of where we're sitting, and that really only leaves the Todd Paytons and John Morrises of the world.
Yeah, it's an interesting scenario Joel mentioned about he's off contract in 24, and I think he's sort of once bitten, twice shy. He left the Warriors early, so I don't think he'd want to leave the Cowboys early. That's sort of a reputation you probably don't want. But I think the Tigers' job possibly is enticing for him. But I don't think you can go 18 months with a Brett Kamali. If you told me it was Tim Sheens for 18 months into Todd Payton, I could possibly cop that. But that's a long time to wait with an interim coach and new players coming next year. But I was going to ask Joel just quickly, why don't we just, rip the Band-Aid off and tell Tim Sheens, you're the guy that knows this club, you develop players, why don't you become the head coach? I mean, we're failing everyone else. The only time we've ever been successful is with you. So why don't we just go with you? You didn't manage to appoint Serraldo. Is that something that he could be convinced to do? Because he's shied away from that so far, but I get the feeling these coaches, the bug is always there.
He is a development coach. He does tick that box. I guess you could say, well, we've got a group of people coming through that are 17, 18. So if he had the job for 3 years and you get those guys up to regular first graders, and in that time you're hunting for and keeping your eyes, not so much obviously at 3 years, but towards the last 18 months, because he'd be pushing up towards 70, 74 or something like that at that stage. Look, it's not the craziest idea, but I don't think we're going to do it. He's pretty consistently said he's not going to coach. But as opposed to, I've got to be honest, Shane Flanagan is not filling me with confidence. John Morris is not filling me with confidence. I'm a bit iffy about Todd Payton. I really like Todd Payton. He would be my pick at this point, but everybody else is pretty, I don't know, just nothing's getting me very excited. Declan?
Yeah, just to go back on Eddie's point with Todd Payton, like theoretically, if the Tigers were to sign Payton for 2024, like could the Cowboys like justify holding him for 2023 because he's not going to be there long term? It was kind of like when Ivan Cleary, when there was rumors that he was going to sign with Penrith, and if worst came to worst, he was just going to sign like 2 years out because he still had 2 years on his contract with us. And from our point of view, I just felt that was completely untenable because you need a coach to be there to plan long term. So if Payton did sign with us, like, could the Cowboys hold on to him because he's not going to be there long term? So that's detrimental to them. So maybe that's something that Sheen sees as a potential way to get him here early.
Well, and if you're talking about Ivan Cleary doing that, he's actually done that twice now because he did that the first time he went to Penrith from the Warriors. He still had a contract with the Warriors for the following year and signed early with Penrith, and the Warriors released him. So I doubt many clubs are going to keep a coach once they're signed to another club because basically you've got an opposition's coach with an open book to your club for 12 months. So I think if we did sign him for 24, I think in all likelihood the Cowboys tell him now's the time to go. But it's whether he's willing to create that situation as well. As Joel said a moment ago, he already kind of not so much left the Warriors in the lurch, but he left the Warriors to take up this Cowboys role, and whether he's willing to put himself in that position again where signing out 12 months in advance. I don't know whether he'd be willing to sign for another club at this point in time. If you're looking at it from that angle, I just don't think you'd sign it. But if he really wants to come here, then who knows?
To be fair, I don't really think he left the Warriors in the lurch because, you know, Kearney got sacked in 2020 and he was the assistant coach and he got upgraded. And then they tried to give him the permanent job, but he just said no. So it's not like he had a contract as head coach that he walked out on. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that he's got a reputation for like walking out on clubs because I think he was within his rights not to like sign long term with the Warriors because it was rumored at the time that his family wanted to live in Australia as opposed to New Zealand.
The interesting thing is, straight after that though, the Warriors have been based in Australia for the last 2.5 years. So he could have had both, but I don't think he'd regret coming back and going to the Cowboys at this point in time. It's just whether he sees his long-term future at the Cowboys. I think he firmly believes he made the right choice going there because things are going quite well there. But it depends where he sees the rest of his career.
All right, let's wrap it up there, guys, because we really haven't got much more that we can get our teeth into in regards to fact. We're all sort of still digesting the last 24 hours, and certainly I have never seen this degree of angst amongst the fan base. I think it's pretty incredible. So we're at a real crossroads moment, I think, for the club. But let's look in the crystal ball. The next West Tigers coach will be Gary?
John Morris.
John Morris. Eddie, next coach?
Yeah, I said John Morris 2 weeks ago. I'll stick to that.
And Declan, what do you think?
John Morris.
John Morris. So it's pretty much that's where we're going. I don't know. I just don't feel it. I'm not feeling Morris. I think that Sheens might have something up his sleeve that we haven't quite seen.
Ray, Joel.
Ray. Yep. Turn to the good book.
Vanessa.
Rugby league.
So things could always be worse for us.
No, it couldn't be worse. This is rock bottom.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, guys.
Rising up, straight to the top. Had the guts, got the